Usually I got to just use my own voice to get this loud. Well, thank you everybody for sitting in on our session. It's nice to see everybody, I guess for like the 6th hour here, but we're very excited to be here. As Thomas mentioned, I'm Clair Carter-Ginn. I'm a partner at Forecast, and we are a consultancy focused on talent and casting, and I head up our consultancy for creative and studio operations, and I'm very excited to be here in conversation with Tracey Woods, who happens to live like, I don't know, a mile from me in Brooklyn.
Yeah, very close.
So we came all the way here to talk to you guys in person, even though we talked in New York too. And Tracey is a phenomenal photographer and now director of photography at the Luupe, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about what she's up to and what she's done.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracey Woods. I am director of photography of the Luupe. And the Luupe is, I say, a platform where we kind of bring brands to photographers, female and non-binary photographers. So it's also part community where the photographers are interacting with each other. They're kind of asking each other advice. They are really just leaning on each other for support. And then with the brands are looking for to be more inclusive in who they hire, and they're looking for female photographers. We have photographers basically in every country in every state in the U.S., plus about 60 countries. So a brand can come to us with one creative brief that they need multiple photographers around the world to shoot, or they just have one brief that they need shot. So it really just depends on what the client needs are. My background before the Luupe has been in editorial magazine photography, so I did a lot of fashion and beauty, celebrity portraiture, and did that for about 15 years.
Which is pretty amazing because she's only 25. So we both started in this industry very early.
I have the Benjamin Button effect.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. I learn something new about Tracey every time we talk. Well, one of the things that I love to chat about, clearly we're here to talk about creating inclusive narratives and improving diversity in front of and behind the camera. And as we've had a few conversations and leading up to this event, something that I'm incredibly impressed with is what you're doing at the Luupe, and as you mentioned, connecting photographers and talent who might not have visibility to some of the clients, and also in creating a community for people, not only for clients to come somewhere and have access to some talent that they might not see if they just called like art and commerce, if they called sort of a traditional photography agency, but also helping photographers to grow. So people who might not be based in New York or LA, and I think there's been traditionally, as we've discussed, the route of a photographer's career is to, you go to a big city, you assist,
yes.
And then you get a few of your own gigs, you might start doing high volume e-commerce, then you can do more editorial, and so on and so forth. And as somebody mentioned, there's a couple of studios who open up on the weekends to their staff. But there are a lot of photographers out there that have great eyes, but might not be in a region where they have the ability to connect with clients. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you are connecting talent with clients globally? You told a great story about something you did recently, a big project in New Zealand, and I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Sure. So we, Rugby World Cup reached out to the Luupe, or their agency reached out to the Luupe. They wanted to partner with the Luupe to photograph, originally it was to photograph the female rugby team in New Zealand. And then the brief changed, like in a matter of weeks, and it became more of a kind of campaign because the World Cup just ended, and it's the first time since the pandemic, so they wanted to create this buzz about, we're back in person and we're live. So we had a photographer based in New Zealand with a local producer create this whole campaign called, I guess, Family Reunion. And They wanted to be inclusive in who they hired, which is why they came to the Loop. But they also wanted to use local talent. So we did the campaign, loved it. The photographer reached out to me after the project, and she said she would have never been able to work with a US-based brand before, and for a client of that magnitude without the Loop. Like, you know, she had some great projects, but they were never to that scale.
Right, and you were helping to create and foster those connections, which traditionally clients might not have been, they might not have known who to go to for that.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that we've seen a lot, and I've referenced it a couple times in our conversations, which is, I think there's the tendency to go to who we know, and a lot of times that's simply because of the high volume of work that we have. We know that there are photographers who can bang it out, or we know the creative director loves working with so-and-so. But I think that for, you know, having come from the production side and being an art buyer for many years, I know sometimes I didn't know where to go for new talent. You know, other than having a photographer's rep call me and say, oh, I just got this amazing person in Amsterdam. Are you going to shoot there anytime soon? Well, no, okay. But now there's a resource in the Loop, and I think this is what makes you so unique, is that you're helping to foster these conversations. So for brands who might not know where to go to help them find the diverse talent, to help them find the type of creative talent that they want to work with, to increase these inclusive narratives and to tell a new story and to change the way their brand is thinking, you're providing them with the ability to do so by curating and finding both local talent and talent that might not be equally represented in other places.
Exactly. The talent that we have, we curate the group of photographers. We have, I think, over 800 photographers around the world. And when a brand comes to us, it's sometimes twofold. They like that we're kind of one stop, we're one vendor, versus like if somebody needs to hire 20 photographers, they don't want to onboard 20 photographers, but they'll onboard one vendor, and then we handle all the other additional paperwork. We pay the photographers, we pay their crews, whatever the shoot entails. So that makes it easy for the client, and for smaller brands that don't have large creative departments, sometimes they don't have creative departments at all, they can come to us to kind of help alleviate that need and the stress off of their plate.
Right, and so you're really facilitating a relationship between brands who are looking to expand the diversity of talent that they're utilizing, and also for the talent themselves who are looking to grow their own careers. Because one of the things that you referenced that I thought was so fantastic about the Loop is that when photographers join as part of the community, they get time with you.
They get time with me. I help, I call it speed dating portfolio reviews. I do like 15 or 20-minute portfolio reviews with them to help foster whatever their goal is. Like you'll get a commercial photographer who says, I really want to do more magazine or editorial work. What do I need to do in my portfolio to get that work or get the recognition? Or you have somebody who's not sure, what direction, they may be a little bit all over the place, and I try to help them hone down and kind of find their own voice. Photographers are creatives. They sometimes work in a silo, and they get in their head, they get too close to their work, and they don't know how to separate themselves for it. So I help kind of give them a little kick in the butt and like, no, listen to me, this is what, you should do. I had a photographer, maybe I did a portfolio review with an organization about 10 years ago, and a photographer posted on Instagram just now saying that she did a portfolio review with me, and she didn't like what I said to her. And she said, Tracey, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And she said it wasn't until 10 years later she got what I meant. And she started getting work because she made the changes.
That's amazing.
So with the Loop, we hope to, curate that and get people work.
And I think that something that has come up several times today is video, and helping some of the younger photographers or photographers who aren't going through a more traditional path of coming to New York or LA or to London or just to Copenhagen to assist, helping them understand like the importance of video and what that means. And I think a lot of talent sometimes think that they have to do everything themselves, and helping educate them about what resources are out there. Okay, if you don't want to really run the video camera, you have a DP. Here's how it works, but this needs to be something that you need to be able to offer clients in order to be relevant for certain campaigns.
Every job that I've bid on in the last 6 months has included a video component. Sometimes it's not even photography, it's just video. So that is increasingly, I think it's just across brands. Everybody wants social media, they want TikTok videos, they want Instagram reels, they want banners for their website. So I tell photographers, like you said, some things translate easy, but if you don't want to learn how to operate a video camera, get a DP, work with the DP. You're the director, it's your creative vision, and just kind of take it from there. Like, you don't have to do everything.
Right. Something that that I love is you're providing, again, this connectivity between clients and what I would consider traditionally underrepresented talent, but you're also helping to mentor talent. And that's a huge thing, because I think as all of us, hopefully, at some point in our careers have had a mentor who's been able to share with us, and this is actually something I know we wanted to talk about too, is that when you're taking it back to the brands and to some of the audience in terms of how they might be thinking about, how do I create a more inclusive and diverse narrative within my organization, and what guidance would you have for people?
It's definitely mentorship. It's asking questions, speaking to your colleagues, speaking to your friends. Diversity and inclusion, it's not the same thing, but it's just kind of where we are now. Like, to me, it starts at the top. So to have that in your, whatever you're selling, your product, you need to have people at the top who understand that, have diverse voices, bring on diverse creators who are hiring, not just people in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well. Like, not just the photographers, but the creative directors, the art directors. If you're in a room where there's no one that looks like you and you don't speak up, then you just have no voice and it gets lost. And some things get lost in translation. You see ad campaigns that, hit a little wrong. And if they had someone who had kind of a little bit of diversity in their background, where even if they're not a diverse creator, they've talked to people who are, things wouldn't get, you've seen those things where you're like, well, how did that get by? Because no one questioned it. Like, everyone's like, well, the boss loves it, so it's great.
Right.
But you have to question things. If it doesn't seem right, question it.
And it's an ongoing conversation. It isn't something that we stand up and say, it's in many ways it's like sustainability, which is, we can say, we're recycling cans in the studio, which is a place to start, and that's fantastic. But it needs to be an ongoing conversation.
It's forever ongoing. It doesn't happen overnight. Change doesn't happen overnight. And as soon as we start having conversations like this at Flow, more and more people will understand, and then they would bring it back to their workplace and start having these conversations. Sometimes they're tough, and people don't want to deal in conflict or have any, I don't want to be negative, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's better to ask questions and do it up front versus wait until something goes awry and it's like a big PR mess.
Right. I think something that we talked about early on was, stand up and speak up. And I think that's hard for, as leaders in this audience, we want to create the type of environment for our teams where their voice is heard and where they feel like they can come to us and have honest, realistic conversations. And I think that can get hard for people who are shy or maybe not used to being in an office or a studio environment where there's a lot of different personalities. But I think it's very important to remember to talk to our teams about how they're feeling about the environment, how they're feeling about, does it feel like an inclusive workplace? Be honest and have those conversations, because, every time we all know that when you do something hard, it can be very painful, but when you do it, you just feel that much stronger. And helping to teach the younger generations who are really going to continue this conversation and drive change, anything that we can do to help guide them and be great mentors is absolutely key. And that ties back a little bit to something that we spoke about in terms of what the Loop has been doing as really defining yourselves as a trusted advisor. So rather than a traditional production house or a traditional photography agency, you are an organization that is helping brands navigate some of this change by sharing with them how to have some of these conversations, or sharing with them and asking them to come to the table and speak to your community and share their insights as well.
Exactly. We do a lot of community events for our photographers that are just for people within the organization, where we bring in trusted speakers, we give advice, it could be, we ask the community what they want. So, we'll do a poll and someone's like, I really need to know about SEO. Like, I don't know anything about SEO, I'm doing it wrong. So we brought in an SEO expert. Or they want to meet someone who works in magazines or newspapers because they really want to, I want to work for the New York Times. So then I call in my network of people that I know, and we did a panel, and we had people from like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, like People Magazine, where it's a range of people, but everyone's glad to give advice. Yes. They're just really glad to give advice and help people.
Exactly, and you are including new people in the narrative that perhaps they hadn't been before, and that includes people who are both seasoned professionals as well as younger people coming.
There's younger photographers, there are seasoned professionals. People join for different reasons. Sometimes it's just community. Like, I'm good with the jobs that I'm getting. I just want that community aspect. Then you'll have a younger photographer, in the middle of, some small state in, the US or a small country, who doesn't have access to, like you said, like big name photographers or big studios to work for. So they really grab onto that kind of community. We work with a wide variety of brands, from like Facebook, Dropbox, Peloton, Sweet Green. Like, there's companies like Sweet Green, and I don't think they have that here, but it's a US-based fast casual salad chain where we have photographers across the US photograph every new store opening for their social media. And it looks consistent because their creative brief that they sent to us is very direct, and we find the right photographers that can match that brief. And we have other brands who look at that, and other fast casual chains or fast food chains, and are like, I wonder if Sweet Green is sending one photographer to every store. It's like, no, they don't have the budget for that.
Right.
They come to the Loop, and we handle that for them.
And I think traditionally there have been production houses that have done that type of work, but what they haven't done is really, Getty certainly has always had event photographers in every region. I used them a lot when I was at Michael Kors. But again, you're giving the voice to people who aren't traditionally heard, very loudly at least. And that is one of the most amazing things that I think we can do as leaders, is again, bring those voices to the forefront to make sure that they're being heard. And one of the things that I know we also wanted to talk about was learning from each other and learning from people who are already doing this and doing it well, because I think it's hard to get started sometimes, and what's the strategy? If your overall organization doesn't have a sustainability strategy, if they don't have a strategy around driving inclusivity and diversity in the organization, how do you get started? And I think, again, it's finding trusted advisors like Tracey, looking for people who are already making change within their own organizations and talking to them. I mean, it's one of the great things about Flow is the fact that we as a community haven't had the opportunity to really get together and have some of these conversations. And I'm very excited because everybody that we've spoken with in the past few days has brought something new to the table in terms of what we were going to talk about. So I think what we thought we were going to talk about when we met in New York is a little bit different than what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think it also, like, just talking to everyone that I'm meeting here and listening to kind of what their concerns and problem areas are has helped kind of push the conversation differently.
Yes.
In a good way.
Yes.
I just think it all stems from just talking to people, meeting people, talking, don't be afraid. To me, there's no such thing as a stupid question. I'd rather have someone ask me a question, as a, Black American woman, my perspective is going to be different than someone else.
Absolutely.
So I'd rather you ask me, like, well, what do you think about this, and how should I handle this, versus just trying to think you can figure it out on your own. And then, that's when sometimes problems happen and things go awry.
Right. And I think it's making sure that, the conversation keeps happening. Something that comes up for us a lot with casting is we'll have people say brands want to be more size inclusive. And the issue isn't that they don't want to hire models of different sizes. The issue is that, as we've been talking about earlier today, you get one set of samples. And if you're really lucky, you might get two. And then you're only getting two sizes, and as we talked about yesterday, they might not be actually that different. Is a 4 that different than an 8? And so how do you continue to try to drive size inclusivity when we haven't figured out how to do it virtually yet? That retouching, the texture on sweaters is extremely difficult, so we can't necessarily do it in post. But the fact is, I'm going to ask every single vendor that I meet, and some of you I know I've already talked to about this, what are you doing? Have you seen anything in the marketplace? And again, it's having those conversations to drive this forward and continuing to advocate for inclusivity and diversity in our organizations and in content. And as consumers, what are we buying that continues to show that this is important to us? I'm going to go back to sustainability as well. We have to continue to put up our hand and say, this is what we want as consumers, and then as photography and content creation leaders, also put up our hand and say, this is the way we're going to do this.
And I think, when you were talking about fashion, like, I think of a brand like Rihanna's Savage Fenty, where she made a conscious effort. I don't care. She has models of all different sizes, different backgrounds. She has people who are, it's just a great brand in that sense that she is truly being diverse and inclusive in her hiring.
And talk about leadership. I mean, that's where it needs to start. You have to have a leader who said, this is important to who we are as a brand, and we're going to stand by this, and this is going to be part of our core values. And if it isn't, we can all say, rah, 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 we're going to take, we're going to do something different, and how long is that going to last if it isn't part of the overall brand mission and value system. So I think it's important for brands to make sure that this conversation is happening, both at the leadership level and down on the day-to-day level, to make sure that everyone is being heard, that they feel like their opinions and their ideas are being heard, and then also for leadership to understand that it's not only important as a brand, but it's also important for our teams.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Well, and I just looked, and we're already over time, so do we have some Q&A? All right. Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't take that from you earlier. All right. Okay. Instead of turning around, I'm just going to do this. All right, top question right now is, like we heard about green hushing, do you think companies are being quiet about inclusion because they fear they are not doing enough?
Oh, I'm guessing yes.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a yes.
Well, I think nobody wants the PR nightmare where they say they're doing something and then it comes out that they did it once and it was
And
never
that,
repeated.
yes.
Yep, yep. Again, it has to
It
start
has to be like more than once. You know, it's small steps. You start small. You know, if you're a brand and you do do an ad campaign and, a small ad campaign, it doesn't need to be anything. Start with your social media. That's the first place that people go to find, you know, sometimes like what you're doing as a brand. Like just start there. Get a lot more. I know like user generated content is a problem. And one thing like at the Loop, we'll get brands who say, oh, I've been using influencers or getting UGC, but it doesn't really look good. So we want the look of UGC, but we want professional photographers.
Yes, yes. And actually something that I thought was really interesting is during the pandemic, I saw with a variety of clients doing the shoot at home where they'd send the merchandise to the model and the model would have a friend shoot them, or if they happen to live with a photographer or be in a pod with a photographer, do a lot of that. And some of that was sustainable, but there was so much work on the back end, it could never be something that was viable as a true PDP option long term. But I think people are being inventive.
Oh, definitely during the pandemic, people were very inventive doing that. You saw it in magazines where they would send a celebrity the camera and they would shoot themselves.
Yes.
Or shoot it with their phone. There was a lot of, I've done some remote where it was true remote, like, they're setting up a phone and you're kind of directing them.
Directing, yep, sure. Thank God we can actually get into the studio again. Just saying. Okay. Love the concept of the loop. Have you seen a sharp increase in demand now that everybody wants to be seen as being more diverse and inclusive?
Oh, definitely. So we have brand managers who actually reach out to brands to sell the mission of the loop. And everyone's kind of jumping on the bandwagon, because they want that kind of diversity in their who they're hiring, for photographers. And sometimes they're coming to us directly, like, oh, I heard about the Loop. I want to know more about what you do. And you'll get a brand. Sometimes it's like, okay, we want female photographers. Sometimes y'all are like, I need female photographers, but I need someone who's like Latina, or I need someone who is, this ethnicity. So like we can even fine tune it if we had to there. But it's usually just they want female photographers.
That's outstanding. All right, this is a popular question, and I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on it. How do you feel about 3D generated models without stating the fact? Could these represent underrepresented people, or is it damaging and not authentic? I'm assuming that the person who asked that is asking if we create 3D generated models and make them of
different diverse backgrounds.
Yep.
I don't see it as a bad thing. Like as long as you're being inclusive or showing that diversity, I don't see why it would be a bad thing. Now, if that's all you do, then like if everything that you in your product line or your website is computer generated, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And whoever asked that, I'd really be interested to take that offline and have a conversation, because if you're not being very diverse in, like, let's say the real models you're shooting, is it a location issue? Is it the studio, the direction? Anyways, find me later, because I want to talk about that. I think that's really interesting. Okay, how would an individual who wants to be on the books with the Loop go about it around the world? Meaning, I assume, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but if somebody wants to be part of the Loop community, do they apply online? Is there?
Oh, yes. So like if you're a photographer, you just go to theloop.com and then you hit the tab for photographers and it will kind of give you the outline of what it is. You apply. It is curated. We really try to look at the work that you're doing to make sure that we can sell you to brands. Like sometimes I see photographers, I'm like, they're not ready yet. They're they have 5 images. I'm like, yeah, you need a little bit more than 5. Or I'll see potential, like I'll look at their work and I say, there's something there. Like just, keep them on the back burner and see maybe if they kind of develop some more work. I've had people reach out to me and say, I applied, but, I didn't get accepted. Can you tell me why? And, I did a little kind of portfolio review with them. And I said, can you work on this? This is what you need to do to make your work better. Not even better, just stronger. Because sometimes, as I said earlier, photographers are very close to what they do. And they can't see past it. And then, I've had photographers, like I said, who don't like the advice that I'm giving them. My own friend, I was trying to help him get a job like years ago. And he's like, I love all these images. I'm like, get rid of them all. I want to see 3 images. And we had a huge argument, but he got the job because he listened to me.
Yes. Well, then I think that's the thing about being a mentor is helping them understand what's appealing to brands. I mean, I think we're all creative people, whether we have operations behind that creative name or not. At the end of the day, we have work that belongs to us in our soul, and we have work that we sell, and we have work that we do in our day jobs, and it's hard to separate those, but being able to give guidance and say, this is what you need to do to get those gigs now, and this is what will continue to foster your career and give you more visibility with clients.
Exactly.
So one thing that we didn't talk about, which somebody asked, which is a great question, is when was the Loop created? It seems like a one-of-a-kind approach to represent otherwise underrepresented people.
So the Loop is a fairly new company. It was founded in 2019 as a company. The founder, her name is Karen Sachs, had the idea for years. And basically she started it because she was, she came from a stock photo background and also some editorial, and she was tired of hearing her friends at agencies and creative directors and saying that they were having a hard time finding female photographers. And she's like, well, they're there. You're just not searching, or you're using, like you said, the same people over and over again. So this idea was fostered and, kind of festering in her head. And she just took the plunge, in early 2019 and called like 10 photographer friends. And that's how it started.
That's amazing. And now you have how many around the world?
We have about 800 photographers around the world.
Which is incredible growth in that period of time regardless. But then we had a pandemic in there, I think. So
Yeah.
It's amazing, again, because you're also helping people get connected. And then as I think about it, we're out of time, I'll shut up real quick. But the other thing is that for people who couldn't do shoots where they were physically
The pandemic helped
Exactly.
because now they needed local photographers.
Yes.
They needed photographers wherever they were based out of.
Exactly. All right, well, please come and grab us, especially after we've had a cocktail. And let's continue these conversations. And thank you so much for taking time to just spend some time with us.
Thank you, everyone.